Hi everyone. So it's been a while. I thought I'd do another update on how things are going with the Daleks Master Plan animation. Good news is there's been lots of progress, although sometimes it's been a bit of a case of kind of one step forward, two steps back, or at least one step back, two steps forward. So I finally finished the scene I've been working on for months now, which was the communications room scene. I was quite pleased with that, but it became apparent very quickly that there were some problems with the rendering. In particular, you can see this kind of fizzing on the hair of the characters, and this gets quite distracting in the close-ups. What's happening here is Blender's denoising algorithm works by kind of analysing each frame on its own and denoising them individually, so that then when you put them together in a sequence, the denoising kind of doesn't flow properly across the animation. It's kind of a similar problem to what you get with things like hair and fur in stop motion animation. It turns out that Blender has a function for temporal denoising, which is where it kind of looks at all of the frames together and then denoises them as a group. But it's hidden away in the developer tools, and you wouldn't really know it was there unless you were told it was there. The other problem with it is that you have to render things in a specific format, which isn't the format I originally used. The upshot of which was that I had to re-render quite a few elements of the communications room scene, at least over the hair and faces of the characters. And that did improve things, hopefully. I mean, it's still not perfect, but it is better than what we had before. The other kind of step backward, in the last one of these updates, I mentioned that I wasn't very happy with the character models for Brett Vian and Kurt Gantry. I did those basically the very first thing I did for this animation well over a year ago now, and I've improved kind of quite a bit in terms of my skills with things like skin shading, and hopefully got a bit better in terms of likenesses of characters and things like that. So I decided I did want to redo those before I moved on with any more scenes featuring those characters. And actually, that didn't take too long, and hopefully you can see that I think it does make quite a big difference, actually, particularly to Kurt Gantry. He was the only character I didn't use particle hair for. I had originally thought about using alpha textured planes, which is more a technique you see in like video games and things, rather than strand-based hair, which saves a little bit of rendering time, but it turned out it wasn't actually that significant, and I was losing a lot of time actually trying to make the hair. It's a lot easier to use the strand-based rendering. So I completely redid Gantry's hair. I changed his face a fair bit, and I upgraded the skin shaders and things on the characters, as well as putting in things like wrinkle maps, so that when their faces deform, you get extra wrinkles here and there. I also took the opportunity to improve the forest set, so it's got a lot more foliage now, and that hopefully adds a fair bit. While I was doing this kind of tidy up work on the earlier scene, I was also working on assets for the forthcoming scene. So, mainly just because I felt like it, I designed a couple of Vaga plants. These are a little bit different to what you see in the actual Daleks Master Plan and Mission to the Unknown episodes, but hopefully they're still kind of in the spirit of them. So I've got one that's quite a newly transformed one, and it's still kind of like, I wanted the idea of a plant growing out of a person, out parasitizing the body of a human being. And then I also made a more mature Vag plant, which is slightly closer to what you see on TV, although given that what's on TV is not the most, let's say, the most terrifying monster, it does look a little bit like a man wrapped in cotton wool. I wanted to keep more in line with the sort of the spirit of the monster, rather than being slavishly bound to how they appeared in the 1960s. As for where I'm going to use these, the Vagas don't actually appear to a huge degree, if at all, in this episode. I think the loose cannon reconstruction mentions that the Doctor nearly touches one at one point, but they don't really do very much. But, you can't do Daleks Master Plan with, you can't do the Kembel scenes without some Vaga plants. And I was inspired and I wanted to give them a go and kind of come up with my version of this monster. So I will find somewhere for them to be. It probably won't be a very big role, but they'll be there in the jungle somewhere. I also finally got to build a Dalek, which is nice. I'd built my own Daleks in the past. If you've seen my short clip from Big Finish's Genocide Machine, or the Dalek Empire one I did after that, these use a custom designed Dalek, which I did a little while ago, which aimed to kind of be quite close to the classic series Dalek, but a kind of a refined version, if you like. Not the full-on kind of chunky new series Daleks, but a slightly more refined version of the original one, with kind of some of the colour schemes from the old 1960s comics and things like that. And I did briefly think about using those Daleks again for this, given that they are quite close to the classic series, but in the end I thought it wouldn't actually take that long to build a faithful Dalek for the 1960s, and it's a good thing to have. Nice exercise. It's always fun building Daleks. So I made myself a little Daleks Master Plan era Dalek. It has a slightly refined control rig compared to my previous Daleks, which is good. So it has things like you can direct where it's looking at, and the head will automatically rotate to kind of point in that direction, as well as it just controlling the eye going up and down. It has control for the iris, the plunger can go in and out, all the kind of things you'd like. It also has the ability for the top half of the Dalek to wobble slightly, just to sell that moving over the bumpy ground effect that you get in wonderful old Doctor Who. How much I'm going to utilise that, I'm not sure yet, but you may see a little bit of Dalek wobble, just a subtle amount. So eventually, I say eventually, it didn't actually take that long to redo the first Brett Vine and Kurt Gantry scene, and then I moved on to the next one, which is what I'm working on at the moment. It's largely all animated and modelled at this point. Obviously, it uses a lot of the same set as the first scene that features them, although I have had to expand it a little bit in new directions. To be honest, I was kind of mostly hindered for this one by the weather we had this summer, because I use, as I mentioned in the last one of these updates, I use a motion capture system to get the basis for the character animation, and that means I have to go and film myself out in the garden. And it's been so wet this summer that finding a day when I was able to do that, when I was not working and had the time and it wasn't chucking it down with rain, turned out to be surprisingly difficult. But got there in the end. It's getting easier, I think, to do the character animation. I'm getting a bit more into the swing of it, and it still requires a fair bit of tidy up, and it's not perfect, but it's not taking forever to sort it out. What I did do with this clip was I tried a few new things with the facial animation. I'm aware that it's not my forte to get kind of natural lip movements. Some sequences are okay, but others are not so good. There are some solutions out there for kind of automatically kind of motion capturing them from video, doing a kind of performance capture thing. And I looked into those a lot, but there isn't really anything suitable that I have access to. You can do it if you have an iPhone, but I don't. I have an Android-based phone, and that doesn't have the depth sensor that lets you kind of automatically motion capture facial animation. So what I tried instead was creating just a reference video by using a head-mounted rig. I've used reference on some of the previous lip syncing bits as well. It's quite an artificial situation when you're trying to read the lines in time with the character at the same time as looking into a camera, so that you have good footage of yourself doing it that you can then use in your actual animation. So what I tried for this sequence was I created a video prompt to sort of sing along the lines that tells me exactly what the words are and when they're coming up, to help me keep in time with the original actors. And again, this wasn't perfect, but it was close enough that I could sort of move things around in Blender, and it was helpful. Initially, I tried creating a sort of head-mounted rig, by which I mean I sellotaped a selfie stick to a bike helmet and mounted my phone in front of my face, which in theory would allow me to kind of move my head around while I was doing this and sort of act out the scene as well. Which it did work, but it wasn't the best experience, really. I think I need to rig a counterbalance on the back of the helmet because it's surprisingly uncomfortable. You wouldn't think like a selfie stick and a phone weighs that much, but it does create a fair bit of discomfort in the neck with the kind of pulling forward of your head. But also, because I'm having to read off a screen anyway, I didn't find I was able to do a huge amount of kind of acting. Also, I'm not an actor, so it's pretty much all I could do just to read the lines more or less in time, never mind adding much more acting than that. So I tried that technique for Kurt Gantry's facial movements, and for Brett Vian I went back to the old system of just having a camera on a tripod in front of me and recording it that way. But I did again use the kind of video auto cue prompter to keep a bit more in time with the original lines, and I think that worked well, and that's probably what I'm going to carry on using for later scenes. I still haven't finished rendering out this scene yet, so we'll see how much better the lip movement is in this compared to other scenes, if at all. But so far what I've seen, I'm reasonably optimistic. It's still not going to be like Pixar quality or anything, but I'm hopefully getting better each time. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. We're working through the Brett Vian and Kurt Gantry scene that leads up to Kurt Gantry's extermination by the Daleks. I've rendered a couple of test images, but I haven't fully rendered the sequence of the Dalek actually doing anything yet, so that's something for me to look forward to. While I'm doing that, I'm also working on assets for the next scene, and actually the ones to follow that as well. So I'm slowly building up a library of buildings and structures for the Dalek city. I need to start creating the delegate spaceships that you can see on the various landing pads around the spaceport. Again, I'm probably not going to be too slavish in replicating what was on screen, partly because they're very small in the surviving footage and photographs. You can more or less make out what some of these spaceships look like, but they're very small and obviously not the focus of the scene. Also, they do kind of all look quite visually similar in terms of style. I mean, that's perhaps not surprising. They were probably made very quickly, probably by the same designer who did Mavic Chen's Spa, but they do kind of look like they came out of the same factory as the Spa. So I think it wouldn't hurt to create a little bit more diversity there and make some of them look a little bit more alien, as well as perhaps having a few Dalek saucers dotted around the place as well. So I'm in the process of creating a bit of a library of Dalek structures. I am storyboarding the next scene, which leads to Brett discovering the TARDIS. Again, this is another one I think that I might slightly expand, because in terms of the original, it is quite a short sequence. Obviously, there's not a lot of dialogue there, so it's hard to know exactly what's going on. I looked at the recon again, which is my main kind of reference for this, and it's basically about 10 to 15 seconds long, and it just says Brett moves briskly through the jungle and then trips up, which I don't know how that would have looked on screen. I'm sure Douglas Camfield would have done a good job with it, but it's not the most inspiring set of stage directions. And an important part of this animation, because it is such a big project, is doing things that keep me interested, that keep my kind of motivation up. So I thought it would be good to slightly beef up that sequence into something a little bit more dramatic. It's not going to be a 10-minute chase sequence or anything like that. I'm thinking maybe it might run up to about 30 seconds or something like that. But I do want to make it a little bit more visually interesting and a bit more dramatic than just a brisk walk through the jungle followed by tripping up and falling on his face. I think we can do a little bit better for the character of Brett Vian than that. So yeah, then we get the TARDIS appearing. I made a First Doctor's TARDIS exterior model about 10, maybe even more years ago, which hopefully will be more or less okay for this. I'll have another look at it, but I don't think it's going to need too much work. So yeah, I'm hoping I can crack through that scene reasonably quickly. Then we need to think about the Doctor and Katerina again, because now that I've brought up Brett Vian and Kurt Gantry's standard of character models, I'm now looking again at the Doctor and Katerina and thinking, they could be a little bit better as well. Katerina doesn't really look like Adrian Hill. And I made a kind of conscious decision at the beginning that it was going to be very difficult to get her to look like Adrian Hill, because we had not a huge amount of good reference for her as Katerina, and not a lot of it from the right kind of angles for 3D modelling her. I'm sure more proficient 3D modelers could do it, but it was a little bit outside my skill area. So I didn't really attempt to make her look too much like the original actress. I just wanted something that looked sort of in keeping with the spirit of the character. But that said, I think I can probably do a little bit better, and I wasn't happy with things like how her hair was moving and some stuff like that. So I want to have another tidy up on Katerina. It didn't take too long to do Brett and Kurt, so I think that's worth doing. The Doctor is a funny one. William Hartnell, it turns out, looks really different depending on things like lighting conditions and angle and camera lens and all sorts of things. He's very distinctive, but he also looks really quite different from one photo to another, which makes 3D modelling him really challenging. And I found my 3D model looks okay from certain angles, and this was sort of the problem I had with Brett as well. From some angles it was like, yeah, that looks quite good, but from others it just looks weird. So I think I will have another pass on those character models. I can definitely make the Doctor's hair a little bit better, some other things, and that will set us hopefully on course for the second half of the episode. Whether that means I then go back and redo the TARDIS scenes that I've already done, I'm not sure. I think there's a good chance I will do that, because some of the movement in it wasn't great as well. There's some stuff in there that looked a little bit awkward and I want to have another pass at. I don't want to get, like I said in the last update, I don't want to get into the habit of just constantly re-rendering and redoing the stuff I've already done. But while I've only got one scene with these characters done so far, now is kind of the time to make these changes if I'm going to do it. And with someone as important as the Doctor, you do kind of have to get it as right as you can. So I think that's pretty much all I have in terms of news and updates. I'm making good progress on current Brett and Kurt scene. I would expect I'll probably have that finished in the next couple of weeks, which would be nice. And then I've got a fair bit of kind of asset creation and modelling to do for different areas of jungle for the next scene. I've got to finish that Dalek City, so that'll probably keep us going until around the end of the year, I would guess. And by that point we might be about 14-15 minutes through the episode. It's a reasonably short episode in terms of classic Doctor Who. I think if you cut off the title sequences it's only about 20 minutes, which is one of the reasons I chose it. So yeah, all being well, we should be closing in on maybe about half to 2/3 of the episode done by the end of the year. But yeah, I'll leave you for now and get back to working on it, and hopefully have another one of these updates in another month or two. Bye.